Hi, and welcome to my presentation, Assumption versus Reality, Emergency Remote Learning Challenges for Students, for the Teachers Journeys 2020 conference. My name is Jackson Lee. I'm a lecturer at Toyo University, and thank you for making time to be here with me. Now, my presentation is not very visual heavy, so feel free if you want to cook lunch or fold laundry while watching my presentation. That's all good. When a presenter walks into a room, they usually scan the room to see who is there, and they start making guesses about the audience based on their age, how they're dressed, what their body languages are like, and so on. Many of us do that. We make assumptions. And we do that because we believe by making assumptions, we can then slightly alter our presentation or speech or lecture in terms of the content or delivery to match what the audience would respond well towards. Some presenters would also start asking the audience questions to confirm. What levels do you teach? How long have you been teaching in Japan? And of course, many teachers do that too when they go to class and ask, how many of you have heard of extensive reading? Or how many of you plan to use English at your job in the future? However, the extra challenge of the spring 2020 semester was that it was delivered purely online for most schools, and often with a good portion of the course delivered remotely. Basically, the new unexpected online format made it so much more difficult for us to connect with the students. Partially because we were all distracted by new things, but it was also that we were not used to connecting with students through the internet. We were teaching these online students for the first time, and for a lot of teachers, we had to start making assumptions because we've never dealt with online students. We wanted to make educated assumptions so that when we walk in, well, we don't actually walk in, but when we turn on Zoom for the first time, we would have an image of what online students are like. It makes sense, right? By creating a profile through generalization, we have an image to work with. Students all have smartphones, I'm sure. My students are not majoring in English, so they probably don't care. This generation of kids all used Instagram, so they are probably willing and comfortable at taking videos of themselves. Now, using those assumptions, we can then design courses or activities better to fit those kind of students. It does make sense, but it also has the risk of making false assumptions, and some teachers did. Based on my experience and by summarizing some stories I've heard from colleagues, former colleagues, and stories shared online, I've summarized early assumptions about students into three main areas: ability, access to resources, and attitude. Yes, the second item could just be called resources, but I wanted to get the AAA for bonus stylish points. Now, for each area, I will provide 3 examples, as well as possible reasonings or justifications behind how the assumptions were formed, and the reality of students' experiences will also be explored. Without further ado, let's start with the first A, ability. The first assumption I want to talk about is this: students are digital natives, so they will be okay. Now, this is the first one, and some teachers may have come to this assumption when they think, well, obviously, students have figured out how to use newer and newer technology. Things that my colleagues and I have never touched and we don't even dare to try. TikTok, Medukari, Line Pay, iPhone 10, iPhone 12. If someone can handle an iPhone 12, they would be able to handle an iPhone 4. So, as people who are using modern technology, our students should be able to handle old tech, like internet browsers and login systems and discussion boards too, right? Well, just because they know how to use TikTok or play Call of Duty, it doesn't mean they know how to use technology for learning or for productive purposes. You will be surprised by the amount of Japanese university students who know that the red line in spell check indicates a spelling mistake, but have no idea that you can right-click on it for auto-suggestions. That's something we grew up with, just like learning how to sign up for an account or attaching a photo onto a forum post. Those are things that our students may have never learned about, and we are asking them to be using our technology with discussion boards and attachments. Even if your course is built around uploading photos onto Instagram, there are students who have never used Instagram before. So just because they are from the age and generation of digital natives, it doesn't mean that all of them are masters in whatever technological expectations we throw at them. By the way, try demonstrating the spell check thing with your students next time you do screen sharing. You will get some amazing reactions from them. The second assumption about their ability is students can take their time and figure websites out. We, the teachers, are taking the heavy loaded side, right? Going through admin access on the LMS, making and writing materials for them to see. They are using the user-friendly accounts with less options and FAQs to help them out. They should be able to figure it out. Well, yes and no, because we might forget a few things. Namely, the websites might not be in Japanese. So Google Forms, for example, yes, there is the Japanese version, but Schoology doesn't really have a friendly Japanese interface. And also, we are looking at the big picture of the whole semester, but the students are only seeing one piece of the puzzle at a time. They are looking at one material at a time, and also they may have just never done anything similar. So this assumption, thinking, well, they are going to be okay, could be a dangerous one when we think that they're okay, but they're actually crying under the desks at home. The third one about their ability is that students can follow detailed instructions. I used to make the same assumptions too, right? Just like many teachers online. I used to feel angry. I spent 45 minutes writing the instructions in details, over 1,000 words separated into 4 chapters, each one with 2 or more subheadings. Why didn't they read them? Well, even teachers don't follow instructions when they're written in our first language. So, well, we can't really expect students to read everything, especially when they're written in a different language. Even if they try, they may not have understood the instructions, or they thought they understood it, but you actually meant it in a different way. But why couldn't they do it? Well, if they couldn't, maybe it's not their fault. Maybe it was something from the teacher's side. Just because they couldn't do it doesn't mean they didn't try. Moving on to the second A, access to resources. The first assumption is students are staying home, so they have a lot of free time. I mean, if they're staying at home, they don't have to commute to school, they're probably not working part-time, club activities are shut down for now, and that alone is like 20 hours of their week that they're saving, right? So if they have so much time, they should be able to finish everything I'm assigning to them. Well, this is one assumption I heard, sometimes from teachers, but also from my students and former students. They expressed to me that they felt like some of the teachers gave more work than ever before, more books to read and more reports to write. Those two are the main ones. But there are 2 problems with this assumption. Number 1, because most students are doing things online and they're doing remote learning for the first time using new technology, they're actually spending more time figuring out how to work the system rather than spending time to learn. They have to learn how to submit homework onto a learning management system, how to download and open zip files, how to format paragraphs. Instead of getting to walk up to a teacher after class to ask a question, they have to look up how to email teachers. And those all take time, especially when you're doing it in a different language. The other problem is that, as some of my former students told me, several of the teachers were giving them extra homework. So all the free time that they thought they saved, gone. So the math on free time might actually not be as simple. Next, they all have access to Wi-Fi at home. Well, this day and age, Wi-Fi is faster and more common than ever, so if they are living and staying at home, they should have Wi-Fi at home. Well, parents might not have a need for Wi-Fi at home, so they never set it up because students got Wi-Fi at school, right? Or they may have thought that, well, the 50 gig family plan might be enough for everyone. Similarly, the next one, they all have access to computers. Well, this day and age, computers are cheaper than ever, so of course they would have one, or at least the parents should have one. Well, not necessarily true, because plenty of students think that their phones are capable to do everything computers can. And schools have computer labs, so they don't need one at home. Maybe their parents are using the computers during class time, so that they didn't have access to one. The point of the Wi-Fi and computer thing is that we can't assume what they have. Some families might be working their butts off so that the children can enter the university. Perhaps the student has no one to depend on financially for whatever reason. We just don't know what their financial situations are like. I think it's fine to think that most students would have them, but if they don't, we need to understand that and accept that while thinking about what we can do instead. The final A that we're going to talk about is attitude. Some teachers assume they are all going to do their best. And this idea comes from, this is an English major course, a good university, an elective course. So if they choose it, they must be passionate about it and they will do the best. Well, sometimes it's not that they don't want to try harder, but as mentioned before, they might be bogged down by the technical challenges or simply by getting overwhelmed by all the classes. They are also getting less support, no peers, no after-school time to talk to classmates or teachers, no physical office hours that they can just pop in and ask the question. Well, they could email me, sure, but they have never written emails in English before, and they're not confident that they could get their point across. And a lot of students would choose just not to reach out to teachers. All the extra challenges, not because of learning, but because of online learning. They are really stressful, and they are quite discouraging too, that even the most passionate students would feel exhausted. So the idea, well, they are going to do the best. Well, of course, I hope that they will. But if they don't or can't, let's try to understand why. The next assumption about their attitude is the opposite. They are not going to do the best or even try. Well, students at this university are typically lazy. They're not going to try anyway. Well, from experience, I found that a lot of lazy students, they found out that they could be lazy or they could pass the course easily, mostly because their senpais told them. But without school clubs and other social events, many of the new students actually haven't met the senpais yet, so their minds have not been tainted or influenced. If anything, this semester could have been the chance to encourage the whole new class of students to work hard and change the image that a certain course may have built up over years. And also, the idea that the whole class is lazy, the whole grade is lazy, is not always true. It's just not always true. Even with the lowest level classes I've ever taught, I had students asking me tons of questions after class because they wanted to try harder. They were not good at studying, but they did want to get better. If the teachers give up on the students upon walking in, then the students are going to give up on the students. The last assumption I want to talk about is the students want it easy. Well, this is a very difficult semester for everyone, so I'm sure they would be happy if this semester is made easier. And they're not English majors, so I'm sure they would prefer if this course was made easier so they could focus on classes from their departments. And, well, they have never done anything so technical, so they would probably prefer it if I make things easier, just like, post a picture. And they'll be happy, and I'll be happy. Everybody wins. Now, honestly, unless we know that's what the students want, it is mostly just a self-justification technique, right? Sometimes we want it easy, but we don't want to admit it. So we put it on others and say that they want it too. And by reinforcing that idea in our heads, well, they want it easier too. They want it easier too. It's good for them as well. We start to believe it without even asking the students if they are having a hard time or if that's what they want. And for students who are paying to be enrolled in the university and in our courses, teachers who just make this assumption and then give a minimal effort could be doing something that is very unfair to the students. If you decide on making this semester easier, I'm not judging, but just don't pin it on the students and say that they want it easy. Okay, so now we're more aware of what to be careful about regarding making assumptions about our students. What can we actually do to go into future semester or semesters of online teaching to make them better? Well, personally, when I was sitting down and listing up the assumptions that I or colleagues have been making, I was quite surprised that at times I was not making these assumptions consciously. It was more like taking things for granted, taking students' digital nativeness as granted, taking their access to computers as granted. And upon my own reflection, I decided on 3 things that I will focus on for the coming semesters to come. They are applicable for both online and in-person teaching because they are more about the awareness and approach for teachers to take. And I would like to share them with you. The 3 steps are CPR. The C is to create clear goals. To set clear, realistic, and achievable goals that are beneficial to the students, and we communicate the goals to them. And when the goal is clear to me, then I don't need to stress about how the students are completing them. For example, if my goal is to get students to speak for 2 minutes about why they chose this university, and a couple of students come to me and they tell me for whatever reason they couldn't record videos, well, then audio is fine. I don't need to stress about that. If my goal is for them to join and participate the Zoom class, then it's fine for them to join from their computer or iPad or phone. I don't need to demand that they are accessing the class only from the computers. And sure, it's easier for students to talk when they all have the cameras on, but it depends on the goal, right? If the goal is just for them to have a conversation and the student is struggling because their Wi-Fi bandwidth does not work on their side, then it's okay for them to talk with just the mics on because it will still accomplish the goals that I set out of having a conversation. So as long as my goals are clear to myself and to the students, I can then focus on their accomplishments of the goals rather than worrying about and getting frustrated about the format in how they complete them. The P is for providing support. Provide support to those who ask. Be open and be available in different ways by offering help to students through office hours, emails, informal messages in the LMS, Zoom calls with or without video, and maybe even depending on the topic, using their first language if possible. Providing support also includes giving alternatives. If a student cannot have their cameras on, is it okay to do it without a camera? If they need more time to figure out how to make a PDF file, is it okay for them to just write it on a piece of paper and take a picture and send it to you? Does it accomplish the same goal, going back to the C? And if they can, let's have room to accept the alternatives. That's the support that many students are wishing for. And finally, the R is for to respect their differences. For a semester that we don't get to actually meet our students in person, it is very tempting to just create one generic image in our minds so that when we make decisions, we can base it off that image. Right? It is very easy to just make blanket statements. My students are all lazy. My students are all digital natives. My students can all read instructions no problem. And then we work with those blanket statements. But of course, by relying on blanket statements like that, it's actually turning us ignorant towards the fact that they are all unique individuals. Each of them have different things they excel at and different things they might not have. The danger is not limited to online teaching, but in-person teaching too, especially for teachers who have got students of 30 or 40 in one class. But when we forget to respect their differences, when we ignore the fact that they are all individuals, we are teaching, but we're no longer teaching our students. As I wrap up, I want to clarify that this presentation is not to generalize how teachers make assumptions and then fault ourselves for it. Instead, I hope that this presentation and the examples can be served as reminders on how we, as people, tend to make certain assumptions, and sometimes they are wrong, and sometimes they are unfair. And they might actually end up hindering us from serving to our students' needs. By setting clear goals and focusing on completing the goals, providing sufficient support and alternatives to help them get there, and reminding ourselves to respect the differences that students have and the unique circumstances that they are in, these 3 things will help us become better teachers who are not only teaching to our students, but teaching for our students. This was Assumption versus Reality, Emergency Remote Learning Challenges for Students. I am Jackson Lee. Thank you very much for your time, for being here and going through the entire presentation. And I'm very interested in hearing about your experience too. So please feel free to comment below, ask any questions you have, and I will come back in a few days so that I can get back to you and we can share and exchange ideas. And I will also encourage you to read through the comments of other people so that we can share ideas as a community of teachers. Once again, thank you for watching and enjoy the rest of the conference. See ya.